Hi everyone, this is Elaine Kuhn. I'm the Local History and Genealogy Department Coordinator for the Kenton County Public Library. And today I'm going to present another installment of A Rainbow of Kenton County Houses, a virtual walking tour. We've chosen 7 homes of different colors, as you can see, and highlight the rainbow effect. And we've done some research on all of them, and today is my turn to talk about the one that I've been researching. And here are the dates when the tours are going to air. The one this week is 1213 Greenup Street, but you can see we'll be doing house tours until the 25th of August. And they'll air on Facebook and eventually end up on YouTube. So you can always go back to the library's YouTube page at www.youtube.com/user/KentonLib, L-I-B. All right. So today we're going to talk about 1213 Greenup Street, otherwise known as the Droghi house. And what a beautiful old home it is. If you've ever driven into town on Greenup, you've been past this house. Some people, and I'm the same because I'm paying attention when I'm driving, but if I am able to stop or give a quick look, this one always stands out because it's so beautiful. And it's been there a long time. This is what it looks like from the corner of Greenup and Trevor Street. And as you can see, it's a pretty good sized building. And it's got this wonderful Queen Anne style front porch that I do believe was added several years after the original house was built. And you can also see the wonderful ironwork gate that goes all the way around the property. And we'll talk about some of that more here in a minute. Here's some of the fine work on that front porch. And I just love the fact that it's held up so well all these years. And it's been maintained as well, which is nice. And here's another view from the front. As everything, it could stand some paint, but we can all stand some paint, so I think it holds up really well. So we're going to talk about the man who built the house. His name was Ignatius Droghi. He was born in 1828 in Germany, and when he was about 20 years old, he bought passage to America. His original destination was Philadelphia, where a friend of his father's owned a foundry, and he had already been trained in blacksmithing. But when he got there, he found out that the friend had died, and it could have possibly been because there was a cholera outbreak in 1848 in that area, and unfortunately, Ignatius caught it too, but he was one of the very lucky few that overcame the sickness. And when he finally got himself back together and had a few coins in his pocket, he bought passage to Cincinnati and eventually to Covington. He didn't have much with him, but he was a very hard worker. He arrived in Covington around 1849 and met up with some other German immigrants who helped get him a job at the Bush and Jordan rolling mill as an experienced blacksmith. And the mill was quite busy. They were processing about 3,000 tons of pig iron each year by 1851. After several years, he earned enough money he got married at the Mother of God Church on April 19th, 1853, to Maria Anna Schmidt. And about that same time, he bought some property on Bush Street between 12th and Greenup and Scott Streets for about $880. And there they built a house, and that's where they had their first 4 children. And here's 3 of them: Ignatius Jr., Frederick, and John. Now, you can see from this that the census taker had a hard time with his name, and I had a hard time finding it. I got this image out of Ancestry Library Edition, And how I eventually found it, because Ancestry affords some really creative search capabilities. I searched on the last 3 letters of his name and nothing else, and that's how I came up with it. Crazy, I know, but that's how I found it. Now, here he is listed in the 1861 Covington, Kentucky City Directory, and he's listed as a blacksmith living on the north side of 12th between Scott and Greenup. And you'll notice right below that that's his brother, Lawrence, also lived in Covington. He was a wagon maker, and he lived here for a lot of years as well. But remember, he said that they built the house around 1859 and rented it for a bit, and then he eventually added more onto the house. But the family story goes that in March of 1860, he and his family officially moved into the house on Greenup and gave their property on 12th Street to the Benedictine sisters who were establishing the St. Walburg Academy in that area. So here he's listed in the 1866 Covington City Directory. In parentheses, that's his company, Phillips and Droghi, and that his house is on the west side of Greenup at the corner with Trevor. Now, this is an 1877 map of Covington. It's one of the earliest maps we have that shows where structures are. And I know it's a little hard to see. I'll show you a bigger image here in a minute. But his property is right here, okay? There's a little red line around it. But you'll notice up here, St. Joseph Catholic Church, the Sisters of Charity, and the school. And his family were very faithful members to the St. Joseph Catholic Church. All his children, went to the schools there, went to church there, were baptized, and his funerals, the family funerals, were all through there. Here's a little more of a close-up. See, actually, I think they put J. Droghi, but it's I. Droghi. And that's when you start to see the difference in the spelling of the name. A lot of times you'll see it D-R-O-G-E, but it's pretty well stayed D-R-O-E-G-E for a lot of years. But notice that, remember from the side, it was like there's the main house and then there's additional. That additional is not listed there in 1877. So it must have been built later on. And also notice it doesn't indicate that there was a porch out front. So that's why I think that was added on later. Now this is the same area in the 1886 Sanborn Fire Insurance map of Covington. And we have those Sanborn Fire Insurance maps available online for you to look at. Here's where you see that now that they've added on that 2-story addition in the back that's still standing. Another thing I want you to notice is it says that it's 1217 Greenup, and that's because the address is changed not until probably right before 1920. And it's just because the city was growing and they had to allow for more buildings being built. So for the longest time it was known as 1217. And the red indicates that it was a brick house. When you see yellow, it means wood. And then here is the property again in 1909. And this is the first time you see an indication of that porch. See? Which is pretty cool. So that porch has been there since about 1909. So I think it's in pretty good shape. Okay, Ignatius had lots of children. As a matter of fact, in total, he had 14. With his first wife, he had 5. And after she died, he married Anna's half-sister or stepsister. And she had 9. She went by Maddie, as you can see there. And this isn't even all of them. There's still like 1 or 2 more children yet, because Emily was the youngest. But as you can see, they went to school. The older kids worked and went into the family business. And here's a picture of him in 1878. Now, this picture comes from an article that was published in Northern Kentucky Heritage Magazine, and it was written by family members of the Droghi family and the Bogenschutz family. That was one of his longtime business partners. So you can see there's plenty of them right there, but there were still one or two that hadn't been born yet, Emily especially. Not all of his kids, as was normal back then, not all of his kids lived to adulthood. And even some of them who did get to adulthood didn't live till later in life for various reasons. His business really did start to take off, and here's a listing from the 1868 Covington City Directory. Droghi and Company, manufacturers of cooking and heating stoves and hollowware. His foundry was at the corner of Burnett and Licking River. Their offices were located at 27, 29, and 31 7th Street. And then right below that, it marks where his house is on 1217 Greenup. And there's Lawrence, but now he's Lawrence, and he's living right next door. Here's an advertisement from that same city directory. The Sentinel coal and wood cook stove. The Sentinel has the largest oven and finds of any cooking stove now in use, and its cooking qualities are unsurpassed by any other stove. And here, we'll turn it around so you can see what the stove looked like. That was state of the art back then. You got 4 burners, places, you could bake bread, put in your coal and what have you. Pretty nice. And I imagine it weighed a ton. And here's another advertisement. All kinds of machine castings, it says. And at this point, this is I. Droghi and C. Bogenschutz. Here is a collection of the men who worked at the Foundry in Covington. I don't have a date on this, but it's a really amazing photograph. I doubt if you can see, but every person in this picture is holding a tool of some kind. These guys are holding something with long handles in the back. One of them's holding a wrench. He's holding that almost looks like a pump. And there's a stove in the foreground. But my favorite person is the guy in the white shirt down in the lower corner, and he's holding 2 mugs of dark German beer. So I don't know who he was. It's not marked on the photograph, but I absolutely love this picture. Hopefully he was going to share those. Okay, now this is from the article I mentioned that was in Northern Kentucky Heritage Magazine. It's volume 13, number 1 from 2005. And these are pictures that the family members provided that show where the licking rolling mill was. The licking rolling mill was over near 11th and 12th. The foundry was located where the Licking River met Burnett Street, which is now 16th. And again, here's that city atlas of 1877. And down here in the corner is where Ignatius Droghi's house was. And over here is where the foundry was, the Licking Iron Works. And at 1877, it was listed as Phillips and Jordan Iron Company. So, looks a lot different than it does now. One of my favorite stories about Ignatius Droghi was about him building the columns to help build the present Mother of God Church. Now I'm reading from the article that I just referenced. It says, in 1869, Ignatius was asked if he could make the interior columns for the new Mother of God Church to be built on the 6th Street site of the original 1842 structure in Covington. His associates were incredulous when he accepted the challenge. However, Droghi successfully poured the columns in a horizontal flask form with a sand core. A secret mix of molasses in the sand core was used as a binder. When the columns were completed, these same skeptics doubted he could get them installed. Droghi hitched 6 horses to each column mounted on a wagon, and with the men who had worked on them marching on either side, paraded them from the Foundry at 16th Street and the Licking River to the 6th Street church site. When he arrived at the site, Ignatius was not certain he could accomplish the installation since the columns approached 50 feet or more in height, and he was a novice at the process. His Catholic faith came to his aid, and he said a prayer. "This will be the house of God, and it is named after you, his mother. You will help me put them up." And you know what? They support the church to this very day. And I just love that story. He was determined. Through his life, Mr. Droghi was quite successful. He had several businesses bought and sold, several partnerships joined and dissolved, and eventually was quite wealthy. As a matter of fact, about 1899, the cathedral was in process of being built, and they had kind of run out of money. And Mr. Droghi evidently wrote them a check for $10,000 so that they could continue. And just so you know, that $10,000 in 1899 is worth about $290,000 now. So he helped them finish the cathedral in his own way. He unfortunately died on June the 5th, 1910, not long after one of his sons had died. His cause of death was a cerebral hemorrhage, so he evidently had a stroke. But he's buried in St. Mary's Cemetery in Fort Mitchell. His funeral was hugely attended. There were over 300 people present. And several of his family members are buried there as well. As you can see from his death certificate, he's listed as his home at 1217 Greenup. Who this person is that filled this out, I don't know if they put it on there this time. They knew his father's name was John Droghi, but they didn't know what his mother's name was. And that's his burial site in St. Mary's Cemetery. Now, traditionally, people think of St. Mary's Cemetery in Fort Mitchell as a traditionally Irish Catholic cemetery, but it's not completely like that. There are quite a few German Catholic families buried there, and the Droghis are one of them. And I found this picture on findagrave.com. His youngest child, Emily, never married, and she did help take care of older family members. This picture was taken almost to the day in 1960 where they would have celebrated the family living there continuously for 100 years. And what I also forgot to mention is that the exterior walls are supposedly 1.5 feet thick, and that Ignatius, like I said, he created the iron fences around the house, but there were also cherry wood mantelpieces and marble throughout. I'm sure it was beautiful in its time. When Emily finally passed away, the house was put up for sale. This is one of the collections we have in our Gen Key database. It's the Northern Kentucky Real Estate Records. They mostly come from the 1960s and 70s. But what's great about them is that it tells you a little bit about the house. And even here it says that it was about 100 years old. And sometimes you'll get a photograph, which you can see that it really hasn't changed much in look over the years, except that this tall tree's not there anymore. But everything else is pretty much the same. But the house has had several owners since then, and it is currently a home for adults who are recovering from addiction. And it's just kind of nice to know that people are still living lives in there and the house is still being maintained. And so that's my story about 1213 Greenup Street, known as the Droghi House. And if you have any questions, you can contact us by email at history@kentonlibrary.org or by phone at 859-962-4070, or you can check out our website at kentonlibrary.org/genealogy. Thank you very much and enjoy your day.